What's up guys, Andre here, and today I'd like to take a look at the basics of Angular by building out a to-do app. This is more out of curiosity for myself, as I already have experience in both Vue.js and React, and I kind of just wanted to see how Angular does things. There's also been times when knowing how Angular works would have been beneficial to me. For example, Ionic and NativeScript make heavy use of Angular. So here's the to-do app we'll build. And I've built the exact same app in both Vue and React. So if you're interested in those, I will leave the link in the description. And yes, I know to-do apps are boring, but I feel like they are a great first app to make when you are trying to learn a new framework. So as you expect, you can add a to-do here. You can obviously read to-dos. You can check off finish to-dos. You can delete to-dos, and you can check all. There's a remaining counter here, and you can filter them based on if they're checked or not. And you can clear completed. So yeah, we'll build this from scratch using Angular. So I'm going to be using the latest version of Angular at the time of this recording, which is version 7. So Angular version 2 to 7 is very similar with just minor differences between each version. And hopefully that remains the same for future versions. Just note that the first version of Angular, named AngularJS, is completely different from the rest of them. So if you're Googling stuff and you see AngularJS, then just disregard that. All right, let's jump right into it and learn along the way. I'm going to be looking at Angular from the perspective of someone who already knows Vue or React. So I might refer to them from time to time in the video. And I apologize in advance if I'm not making use of best Angular practices, as I'm literally brand new to Angular and I just learned it the other day. Okay, so the first step is to install the Angular CLI, which is used heavily for quickly scaffolding out new code. So just npm install -g, and after that you should have an ng command. So I already have it installed, so let's go ahead and make our app. So I'm going to do ng new, let's call it to do Angular. And let's add routing. We might take a look at routing later on. And let's make use of Sass, because I like Sass. Okay, it's done. So let's cd into it to do Angular. And let's run ng serve to serve it. So everything compiled successfully, so let's open this in the browser. So here's the default page that Angular gives us. So let's quickly go over the folder structure and see where the important files are. Okay, so here is the folder structure in VS Code. Let's take a look at the source directory. And the index.html is the single page that's served in the single page app. As you can see, here is the root app component that lives right here, and everything will live inside of this component. So pretty much the same as Vue or React, where you have a div with an ID of app. So main.ts, so Angular uses TypeScript. So main.ts is the entry point and sort of just bootstraps everything when we start. Now, if you go into the app directory, this is the main app component, and there are a few files here. So app module ts is the file that sort of ties everything together, and this is where you would be importing other modules. So we'll make use of this when we add some modules later on. App component ts is where our JavaScript is written for the component, and as you can see, it is class-based as well. There is a variable called title, and you can pass this into the view. And there is a decorator here that sort of just scaffolds out some Angular component magic. So app component spec ts is for testing, which we won't look at here. App component s.scss, because we specified Sass, is where CSS will go specific to just this component. So it won't be global. If you want global CSS, that would go in here in style CSS. And each component you make will have its own Sass file. And HTML There's some stuff for routing here too, which we won't look at right away. Maybe when we do routes, we'll look at that. But app component HTML is the template. So as you see here, this is what you see in there. So if I change something here, here are some links to help you start with Angular. And as you expect, it should reload that. Cool. So yeah, the two most important things are this ties everything together, and then the component, the script part of the component is here. As you can see, the title is passed into the view, and it is rendering out the title here. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is just make a component. So I can use this and just delete everything in here, but I'm going to make my own component and just put everything in there for now. Okay, so we're going to make use of the CLI here. We're going to do ngGenerate, or the short form is just G. And if you're not sure, just you can tack on --help. And you can see here that we can add a component. So we can do, again, ngGC component, or you can do C for short. And I want to make one called to-do list. And I want that within a components directory. So let's do that, to-do list. Okay, so it made a new folder with all the files that we needed. And it also updated the app module TS that imports that component. So there it is right there. So definitely make use of the CLI when you're making new components, because manually doing it will take too long. Okay, so here it is in the components directory, and it made a subfolder called to-do list. And again, it made those important files that we need. So here's the template, here's the CSS. We're not going to take a look at testing, and here's the script portion. And here's the selector that you use to import it in your templates. And I'm going to change that to just to-do list. Save that. And now let's go back to app component HTML. Let's get rid of all this. And then let's just do to-do list. And that should render out the to-do list. And you can see here that there's a default P tag in here. Let's see if that worked. And it does work. Cool. Okay, now I'm going to paste in some basic styles for the to-do list, which is taken straight from my View to-do series. And I'll quickly go over it when it's done. Okay, so here's how it looks. Only thing I've done is I wrapped this in a container. I just added a basic form here in the to-do list component. There's nothing here specific to Angular yet. And I have this CSS file specific to this component. And I have some global styles for fonts and stuff like that. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to close this. And yeah, we don't need any more CSS stuff. Okay, so here in the to-do list component, let's define our state here. So we're going to define our to-dos here. So right here, we'll make a new property called to-dos. And for now, let's just make it an object array. So yeah, Angular uses TypeScript, and you have to declare types for your variables. So this is my first time using TypeScript, and although it is a bit more code to write, it actually does help out in development and can detect errors quickly. So it's not very hard, you'll see along the way. And we can set it in here if we like, and then just define the to-dos array in here. Same for any default values. But I'm going to put it in the ngOnInit function, which is a lifecycle hook that gets called when the component is initialized. So if you know React or Vue, very similar to lifecycle hooks in there. So I'm going to set a default for the to-dos. And let me just paste it in. Okay, so as you see, it is an array of objects, and later on we'll be more specific with an object and call it a to-do. But there's 3 items in here, and they have these fields. So the first thing I want to do is just render it on the template page. So let's go into the HTML page. And as you can see, these two are hard-coded right now. So I want to loop over them and render out the to-dos we have in our state. So here's the two here. So I'm just going to remove this one since we're going to loop over them. And Angular makes use of directives. So if you come from Vue, then this is very familiar to you. This is where Vue got it from the original version of Angular. So we just want to do a for loop and iterate over our to-dos. So we'll do ng So the syntax for this is let to-do of to-dos. And I think I have something pasted in from Vue here, so let me remove this. And we just have to interpolate the string here. So just do the double curlies and to-do.title, and that should do it. So there you go. Now our to-dos are rendering out here using the ng directive. Okay, now let's take a look at adding to-dos. So the first thing I want to take a look at is two-way data binding. So if you use Vue, you know what this is. And again, this comes from the original version of Angular. So if you don't know what two-way data binding is, it allows you to bind your form's value to state in your component automatically as the user interacts with that form element. So we want to make use of ngModel. And to do that, we have to import a library here. So we go to app module ts. Let's import it in here. So I'm going to do import forms module from Angular forms. And let's make sure to use it here in our imports. So forms module. Okay, so back to our TypeScript. Back to our template. We want to define a model on this input right here. So this one right here, let's put it right here. So the syntax is like this: ngModel equals, and this value has to go in your state in your component. So we'll add that to do title. I'll save that. Let's go into our TypeScript. And let's add another field here called to do title. That's going to be a string. And let's just default that to an empty string. Okay, so now's a good time to introduce a tool similar to Vue DevTools or React DevTools to debug your code. So from my understanding, there's no official Angular DevTools, but there is a third-party package called Angular that's very similar to Vue DevTools or React DevTools. So let's install that. I mean, you can install that, but I already have that installed, Angury. So just install this. It's a Chrome plugin. And as you expect, if you open DevTools, there is a section for that. Let me just make this bigger for a sec. So right here, I think you saw it. It's called Angury. And as you expect, here's the component tree, and you can see the state in here. So right now you see my to-do title. So this should update as I type in here. So there you go. You see the two-way data binding working. Okay, so let's actually add the to-do now. So back to our template. So now we want to add an event here. So to do events in Angular is actually very similar to Vue. So we want an event listener for the enter key here. So to do that, just do this, key up dot enter. And I really like this modifier key. It's in Vue as well. I'm not sure if Angular did it first, but I really enjoy that. And here is where you call the method you want to run. So in our case, it's add to do, and make sure to add the brackets. Save that. Let's go to our TypeScript. And let's just make that new method down here. So you can just do this way. And you can mutate the state directly. So it's not like React where you have to use setState, which I actually prefer. I prefer mutating directly instead of having to use another function. So we can just push to the to-dos array. So the ID, we'll just hardcode for that. Hardcode this for now. Title is this.todo title. So this is the model we bound to. Completed is false and editing is false. So if I did that right, we should be able to add to this, and Angular should automatically detect the changes, and this should re-render, adding. And there it is. So a few things here. If you want to be strict on your TypeScript, we can put a return type here. In this case, it's not returning anything, so we can just put void. I also want to make sure that you can't add an empty string, so let's check for that. So if this.todo title, so this is what the user entered, trim that, and if the length of that is 0, then we should just early return and not add it. And I also want to clear out the to-do, this text box after they press enter. So we just set the to-do title. And I'm going to make a new piece of state here that just increments the ID. We don't have to do this actually, but let's just do it for our sake. Later on, we'll just make use of the ID coming from a backend. So I just want to increment this every time we add one. Plus plus, and let's just add this ID for to do in our state. So right here, there should be a number, and it should start at 4. So this.id for to do equals 4. Okay. So I'm pressing enter here. You shouldn't be able to add. Cool. New one. It should be empty after I press enter, and it is. Cool. Okay, so now let's quickly do deleting to-dos. Since I'm already in the TypeScript file, let's just do it down here. So after this, let's just do delete to-do. Delete to-do. And this is void as well. Oh yeah, so we're going to take in the ID to delete. And that's going to be a number. And we'll pass that in from the template in a second. So you can use splice here if you want, or I'm going to take the functional approach and use filter. So we want to filter down the to-dos using filter. And we just want to take the to-do and just filter them down to the ones where the IDs don't match. So to-do ID does not equal the ID, and that should remove it. So you can see this red squiggly here. So since it knows it's a type of object, then it says that there's no ID field on the object. We'll fix this in a second. Let me just get deleting working, and then we'll fix this. So back to our template. Right here is the X button. So let's add a new click handler for this. So let's do click. And then we want to call delete to do and pass in the ID. So to do.id. And let's see if that works. Delete. And it does. Cool. Okay, so back to that TypeScript error. So this goes back to up here where we specified the to-dos as an object array. So what we really want to do is specify this as a to-do array. So we can do that, but we just have to set a type or an interface. So we'll stick with the interfaces, and we can put it down here, but I'll show you where to put it, where else you can put it after. So we just want to specify what a to-do is and the fields that make it up. So in our case, it's just an ID, that's the number, title, that's a string, completed, that's a Boolean, and editing, it's a Boolean as well. And now that you see it, it removed that squiggly, and this should still work. Yeah, and everything still works. But if this were a bigger app, then you would need this across your entire application. So let me show you another place you can put it. So I'm going to cut this out. And then we can generate a new interface here. So if I do ngg help, you can see this new interface command. So let's do that. So ngg interface. And let's put it in an interfaces folder, and let's call it to do. Okay, so it made that. I guess it doesn't like the uppercase. It made it lowercase. Okay. So right here, interfaces to do, and we can just paste this in. So I already put the export interface. So let me just grab this and put this in here. Save that, and now we can just import this wherever we need it. So in this case, in here, and if you go all the way up, we can just import it here. So import to do from, where is it? I think it's up here, interfaces / to do. Okay, so that should still work. Cool. Okay, now let's work on editing to-dos. So specifically, I want to double click this and then have a text box show up that allows me to edit this particular to-do. So this can be a bit tricky, but all that's happening is that there is another text box here which either shows or doesn't show based on if this to-do is editing or not. So that's why I have this editing state for each to-do here. So let's start in the template and add that input text box. So right here, it's going to add another one. So let's add input text, and I already have the CSS defined. It's to do item edit. So let's see how that looks. Okay, so there's two now. Let's also set the ngModel on this. So we want the value of this to be the value of the to-do. So if you just set the ngModel, then that will do it. So it's just to-do.title. And let's see if it goes in there. Okay, cool. Okay, so now let's add a double click handler on this, because that's how we want to edit the to-do. So on this label, we can add a double click handler right here. So dbl click equals edit to do, and we'll pass in the current to do. So let's save that, and let's go into our TypeScript. Okay, so let's add that edit to do method after this, edit to do. So it takes in a to do, and that is of type to do, and it's not going to return anything. So let's say void, and all we're going to do is set the to do.editing equals true. Okay, save that. So now when I double click this, let's see if we can see it in here. Let's just do one. So the first one, this should change to true when I double click this. And it does. Cool. So now what I want to do is show or hide these two based on if this is true or false. So we want to conditionally render these two components. So back to our template. So if it's not editing, then we want to show this. But if it is editing, then we want to show the input text box. So let me show you how to do that with another directive, which is ngIf. Again, if you use Vue, this is very similar to you, very familiar to you, I mean. So we want to render this one if it's not editing. So not to do the editing. And let me show you the Angular way first, and then I'll show you another way, which is what I prefer. So the else case, we have to give it a name. So the name I'm going to give it is called editing to do. And then we have to make a new template tag for that else case. So ng template, and then editing to do. And then here is where we want to specify the else case. So that should do it. So there you go. So if I double click this, the text box should come up. Okay, cool. So yeah, the other way would just be to not use this ng template and just negate the ngIf. So it would just be ngIf equals to do dot editing. Yeah, so do whatever you want. I actually find this way cleaner. I really like it in Vue, where it's just vif and velse, but we'll stick to the Angular way here. Okay, so we also want to stick an autofocus attribute on here. So you can see when you double click it, it autofocuses, but when you double click something else, it doesn't autofocus. And we actually need that to happen. So this is taken care of in both React and Vue already. But for Angular, I find that there's nothing built in that handles that, but there is a package, Angular autofocus fix. So basically just install this and that should fix it. So let's go ahead and install this. And I think that overrides the default attribute and injects a custom directive. So now, if I double click and double click something else, that should autofocus. Okay, it's not autofocusing yet because I think we have to blur from the current one. So if the current one removes its focus, then this should work. So let me show you what I mean. So we also want to add a blur event on this. So let's do that. So blur just means once it loses focus. So in our case, once we click off of it, and we want to call a done edit method and pass in the to do. And we also want the same thing happen for when we press the enter key. So I'm going to do another one and just do key up enter here. Enter. And let's go ahead and add this in our TypeScript. So right here, done edit. Again, to do. It's going to be void. And all we have to do is set the editing to false. Okay, so once we double click it and then we click off of it. Okay, cool. So let's see if, okay, so the autofocus is not working because I installed it, but I didn't import it. So let's import it here in our, and then we have to put it in the imports. Okay, so that's what I forgot to do. So let's just do this, import, and let's put it down here. Autofocus module. And now this should work. So double click. Okay, so that's the functionality that I want. Okay, cool. So this should work now. If I change it, press enter, that should persist. Okay, cool. But I also want the ability to escape out. So say I type something, but I change my mind and press escape. I want it to go to what it was originally. So let's go ahead and do that. So back to our TypeScript. So we have to define new state. Let's call it before edit cache. Before edit cache. That's going to be a string. And then let's just do an empty string. And then down here, so when this is when we first click it, double click it, I mean, then we want to set that cache. So this dot before edit cache equals to do dot title. And we also want the same thing to happen if it's an empty string. So we can, right before we finish it, if it's an empty string, so if that to do dot title dot trim dot length equals 0, then the title should be the cache. Okay. And let's make another method for canceling. So this would be when you press escape. We can probably combine it some way, but I'll just make its own method. So yeah, this is the same thing, except we don't need this conditional. Okay, so all we have to do is set an event listener for the escape key. So it would be like this. So key up, escape would be cancel edit. Okay, let's see if this works. So if I try to edit this, I remove this, but if I press escape, it should go back. And that doesn't work because I forgot to change this. Escape. Let's try again, double click, remove, press escape. Awesome. Let's try again for the other case where it's an empty string, press enter. Okay, cool. Okay, now let's work on checking the to-do when it's completed. So right here in the checkbox, all we have to do is set an ngModel on this. So let me just grab this. And the model is going to be to-do.completed. So let's check our state here to see if the state changes for, let's do this one. So completed should be true. So there you go, it changes. So now we just have to conditionally add a class based on if it's completed or not. So right here, so let me just show you. If there's a completed class, then it should have that strike through. Okay. So to conditionally render it, again, if you use Vue, it's very similar. We'll just use this ng class. And then we can put an object in here. Oops. So if we want the completed class, if to do dot completed. Okay, so obviously they're all not completed, but if I just hard code one of them to be completed, actually no, I can just check them. That works now, right? Yeah, so there you go. Cool. Okay, now let's work on this, the items left. So as we check these, we want this to reflect that. So let's add a remaining function here. So let's do remaining. And it's going to be a number. And I'm just going to use filter and then return the length. So we just want the to-dos that are not completed. So this dot to do's dot filter to do not to do dot completed dot length. And then in our template, we can just call that function. So where is it? Right here. Remaining items left. So it should be 3, 2, 1, 0. Cool. Okay, now let's work on this clear completed button. So I don't want this to show unless at least one is checked here. So let's make another function called, let's call it at least one completed. And that's going to be a Boolean. And I'm going to do is return this dot, let me just copy this. But that's going to be the completed ones, dot length. And then we're going to check if it's greater than 0. And then we can do an ngIf on that clear completed button. Where is it? Down here? Yeah. So we can just do ngIf equals, what do I call it? At least one completed. Okay, so that should not show initially. But as I check one, it should show. Cool. And now let's make a clear completed function. So I'm in the template already, so let's just add it here. So click equals, let's say clear completed. And let's add that in here. Clear completed. So that's void. So this dot to do's is going to be this dot to do's dot filter. Let's just filter down the ones that are not completed. Not to do dot completed. And that should do it. All right, let's check if this works. Let's remove these two. There you go. Okay, now let's work on checking all. So if I check this, I want all of this to be checked. So let's make another method. Check all to-dos. Let's make it void. And we're just going to iterate over all the to-dos and set them to true for each to-do dot completed. So usually I just do event.target.checked. But as you can see, TypeScript is complaining. So to make this work, we have to cast this to an HTML input element. HTML input element. So yeah, that should work. Okay, the squiggly's gone. And let's add that here. So right here in the checkbox, we want it to be on the change event. And we just want to do check all to-dos. Okay. Okay, cool. Awesome. Okay, let's work on the filters here. So we have 3, everything active or completed. So let's start by adding, start by adding some state in here. So let's say filter is a string. And initially it's going to be for all. Okay. That should be a string. Save that. Okay, let's go into our Sorry, no. Let's go down here. And I'm just going to paste it in. This video is getting quite long. And I'm going to paste in a to-dos filtered method. And all this does is filter down the to-dos based on the filter. So if it's all, we're just returning all to-dos. If it's active, then we're just returning to-dos that are not completed. And if it's completed, we're returning to-dos that are completed. And now, as we click these ones, we want this filter to update accordingly. So back to our template right here. So I'm going to remove this. We'll add this conditional class rendering as well. Actually, I'm just going to paste it in to save some time. So yeah, I'm doing those two things. I'm setting the class conditional rendering. So if it's active, then the filter is all. It's active if the filter is active, which can be quite confusing because I have two of the same name. And active if the filter is completed. And for the click handler, I'm doing it inline here. So I'm just setting the filter directly here in the template. So that should not work yet. This should work. Okay, so that works. But this is not updating yet. As you see, nothing's happening. Because all we have to do is up here when we're doing the ng4, wherever that is, right here. Instead of the to-dos, we want to iterate over the to-dos filtered. And now that should work. So if I check 2, then active should only be 1 and completed should only be those 2. Awesome. Okay, let's quickly do animations and then we'll call it a day. So in my Vue and React videos, I did animations using just basic CSS transitions using the animate.css library and some helpers in React and Vue. But in Angular, you can do that as well, but they have built-in support for the web animation API. So let's go ahead and make use of that. So the first thing we want to do is import that in our app modules.ts. So let's do that here. Let me just paste it in to save some time. So import the browser animations module from there, and then you can put it here in the imports. Okay. Now, if you want, since the web app animation API doesn't support all browsers, there's a polyfill here for web animations. So if you want that, just uncomment this and then npm install this package if you need older browser support. I'm not going to do that because this is just a demo. Okay, so let's go back into our TypeScript, and the animation declaration goes into the decorator here. So up here, right here. So let's do this quickly. So animations is an array, and we'll call this trigger function. And this is the name of your animation. We'll call it fade. And then the second argument is an array. Actually, let me put this in again. I want VS Code to import it automatically. So if I press tab, there, VS Code does it for me. And now in your template, we want to specify what we named it. So we named it fade. So let's put that right here. So just say @fade. Okay. And here we're going to have 2 animations happen. So one when a to-do item enters and one when it leaves. So let me show you what I mean. So we're going to use the transition method, and that VS Code import that for us. And this one is for the enter state. So this is before the to-do is on the screen. So let's specify the style we want here. Do I need style as well? I do. So let VS Code do that for me. So since we're fading, we want it to be invisible before it enters the page. So let's say opacity 0. And I want to make it go off the page slightly lower than when it comes in. So translate y 30 pixels. So this is the initial state. And then the second argument is going to be the state we want after the animation is done. So the thing it transitions to. So this is the initial state, and this is what you want it to animate it to. So animate. I want this to be imported. There you go. And this is the duration. I'll just set it to 1000, so 1 second so you can see it. And then this is the same as above, but the end state. So in our case, we want opacity to be 1. And transform, let me just copy it. We want it to be 0 at this point. And we have to do the same thing for leaving. So once a to-do leaves the page, so in our case when we delete it, and I'm just going to paste this in to save some time. So similar to this, there's no initial state because the initial state is what we currently have on the page. There should be a comma here. Let me change this to 1000. And this is the thing you're transitioning to. So we want it to be invisible eventually, and then translate y back up 30 pixels. So let's see if this works. So there you go. You see the transition happen. So let's add another one. So you can see it slowly go in. And for deleting, that should work as well. And there you go. It goes down. Awesome. So we have animations working using Angular. And underneath the hood, they're using the Web Animation API. So let me just change that to be slightly quicker. And that looks much better. Awesome. So there you have it, guys. We've taken a look at the basics of Angular and built out this to-do app. There's still a lot of features that we haven't looked at yet, but we'll do so over the next few videos. I hope this was a good first look at Angular if you already have experience with React or Vue. I think all three frameworks are great, and I'm glad that they all exist. Everyone is different and has unique preferences and needs. Having more options is a good thing, and it also pushes the front-end landscape even further. If you're just starting out and trying to figure out which one to learn, do some research on each framework, then learn one of them really well. After that, the transition to others will be pretty easy and the concepts transfer quite well. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next one. Okay, thanks. Bye.